Bloodlines 2 has been delayed into 2021, and I think most people who've been following the development pretty much knew this was going to be the case. The writing has been on the wall for a little while. We've had no meaningful development updates, apart from trying to cash in on an old character, even though they said they were trying to steer clear of Bloodlines 1 stuff for the most part, and that style, so it looks pretty desperate. And I've got to say, with the lack of experience from the team when it comes to making role-playing games, I think we're heading into a bit of a train wreck. Hi, Estelden here. So the news came about only a few hours ago, and it caught me off guard. I had a feeling that this had happened, but I thought it would be a bit quieter towards the end of the year. People are excited for this game, apparently, at least on some corners of the internet from what I've seen, but I think most people are just having a bit of a wait-and-see approach. To be honest, I don't think there's a whole heap of hype. There's other role-playing games coming out. We've got Cyberpunk. Baldur's Gate 3 is getting early access soon. There's Wasteland 3 at the end of the month. So this particular game has been pretty quiet when it comes to who's actually excited, who's getting hyped. Now that the news has come out and we're going into next year, all I'm really thinking about is the scummy sides to this development and the fact that they've promised a lot and I don't really see how they're going to deliver. The writers of this game, Brian and Kara, I believe it is, they've talked about how there's going to be so much more than Bloodlines 1, it's going to be huge, there's all these factions, there's so many more characters, so much more dialogue. They haven't really shown a whole lot of that. We've had videos giving clues to the new characters. They were bringing characters back in pretty desperate fashion from what I saw in the most recent video, with Damsel's return, and she didn't sound anything like the old character, didn't really look in the same style, to be honest. It all looked really a bit flat, I've got to say, so I don't know if this game's anywhere near ready. It seems like they're trying to do what they can to keep people hanging on. And why wouldn't they? Because they've had this game up for pre-order for now over a year. It's been getting on close to 18 months now. And by the time this game comes out, these pre-orders will have been up for over 2 years. And I say that because there's no way they would announce that this game is releasing in 2021, and then that's it if this game was going to be coming pretty soon. It's not going to be coming in January, February. It could be any time. It could be the end of next year. We simply don't know, but I can say pretty much definitely it's not going to be early on. If they did, they would have announced a release date, I reckon, when they announced this change and this delay and things. And that's because, why wouldn't you? If it was just that they were delaying it for a bit of polish, maybe a few systems, maybe a few elements that they needed to tighten up, maybe streamline a bit, make it a more coherent experience, I think they would have been ready to go. This would have come across as a bit more organised. But all they've said is 2021. They've given a very vague description of things, and that's it. They've changed the Steam page, release date 2021, but of course they've kept all these pre-purchases up. And when I first saw this game, when it got announced, I was thinking at the time, I'm like, wow, Bloodlines 1, one of my favourite games ever. But then when I saw what they were doing on the monetization side, I went, it's really scummy. And I support, like, do we call it AA? Like the step down from AAA? I support those games for the most part, but not when they're equally, if not more scummy than the AAA counterpart. And this game very much is. As you can see, they've got the normal game, which is about $85 in my country. They've got the Unsanctioned Edition and the Blood Moon Edition, so it gets more and more expensive. $130 in Australian dollars if you want the full experience, so to speak. Give you some context, because I can't actually click on what I'm getting here. I had to go on their website and I had to jump through a few hoops to actually find out what were in these editions. Apparently, if you buy the Blood Moon Edition, so I don't know if is that the same one? Yeah, Blood Moon Edition, so that's the big one. You're getting a weapon skin, and then you're getting the story pack, 1 and 2, and an expansion, whatever that means. I find it really disingenuous that a game that was meant to come out, I'd say about 6, 7, 8 months ago now, is going to be delayed until next year, and it could be the end of next year, so we're pretty much getting on about 2 years, 2.5 years, potentially, from the game's announcement, that they've been selling a massive bonus edition with all of these story expansion extras. Like, just finish the damn fucking base game first, before you get into this stuff. Because there's not a chance that this stuff has really been fleshed out, besides like a blurb, maybe a few ideas already. Like, these are just words on paper, essentially, so they can put an expensive edition in front of people and collect all of this money up front. It's really damn scummy. And Paradox, the company behind this game, sorry, they're the publisher, I believe. It's Hardsuit Labs, I believe it is, who are actually developing the title. But Paradox have done a lot of scummy stuff like this in the past. They've got a lot of strategy games, heavily monetized, very, very expensive to get a hold of everything. And now they're doing the same thing to Bloodlines 2. I wouldn't have cared so much if this game came out when it was supposed to. I think it was the end of 2019, or even early this year, I wouldn't have cared. But now that it's pushed back so far, it's going to be after March, I would say, at the very least. Even if they try and like push this out and just rush it out the door so they can move on, I don't think it's going to be until probably May, June, essentially, or else they would have announced a release date during the delay. My main worry, though, with this game is just the inexperience around the development. I've followed studios like Obsidian for quite a long time, and I can tell you from their experience and just the industry in general right now, it is very, very hard to make a competent role-playing game, especially when you've got to create a character yourself, and when there's a lot of branching storylines, there's factions, things like that. I don't really think a game's really pulled it off to a full extent in like a bigger mainstream kind of game since Fallout New Vegas. That was based off an existing engine, so Bethesda's Gamebryo engine that they had there, and Obsidian managed to release that out, and it got a pretty good reception for the most part. Since then, there have been other role-playing games. We've had Divinity that's done really well. We've had The Witcher 3 that's done really well. You can call those, of course, RPGs. But they're not really in the same vein as what Vampire is supposedly trying to be. Let me explain. So in Witcher 3, you're playing as Geralt, and you are making some story choices. There are some consequences. Some different things might happen in the RPG sense. But you're not joining factions. There's not a whole lot of really broad scenarios that could happen. It's more that you're getting different endings and different progression, I suppose, in self-contained stories. That's really the bulk of it. And there's a few different things that might happen, but I wouldn't say it's as complicated or as involved as when you've got factions in the mix. And you might join a faction, you might destroy a faction, lots of different things you could do in games like Fallout New Vegas, and I'd even say Elix for something that's a bit AA, that term once again, a bit AA, and you could do that kind of thing. So this game's certainly going to be in that direction, not in the Witcher 3 direction or the Divinity direction. And when we look at Divinity, it's more of a gameplay style role-playing game. You do have your towns and your characters, you can make a few choices, but it's certainly not a very story-heavy game, I would say, in comparison to Fallout or Elix and similar titles like that. Hardsuit Labs, they've got absolutely no experience in this department. Now, I know they've got the writer from Bloodlines 1. He's doing work on this game. How much work? It's hard to say, because when you've got a big name like that, they seem to kind of get attached to these titles, and it seems to be more of a marketing move in a lot of cases, because you get the original guy in, he's involved to some extent, that's going to get the old fans back again, and who really cares what he does in there as long as those old fans come back? We see it with a lot of things. For example, Chris Avellone, he was originally tied to the game. He's done a lot of similar work like that. He worked on the spiritual successor to Planescape Torment, which I just call it Torment Tides of Numenera or blah blah blah, something like that. I can barely remember because it was such a forgettable game, but I doubt that he actually had that much to do with those games. It was more that they got him in. He's like a freelance writer now. He did a little bit of work, and it was pretty much just to have his name attached. So they tried to do the same thing with Chris on Vampire as well. But then apparently there was some controversy and they've gotten rid of him. So they got rid of the guy who's got experience on multiple role-playing games with a really strong narrative focus. So Fallout 2, Knights of the Old Republic 2, Planescape Torment, which he actually designed pretty much the whole thing. They've removed him from the project, and instead they have Cara Allison. And I did a little bit of research on her, and I sort of thought, oh, who's this? What games has she worked on? Now, in notable projects, having a bit of a look, obviously she's really, really hyping up her involvement in Vampire the Bloodlines 2, which is a game that's not out. It's not going to be out for a long time, and we really don't know what the quality is going to be with that. It could be rubbish, and then she'll be scrubbing this from the site, no doubt. But there's Void Bastards, there's Dreams, which is certainly not a narrative game. It's like a toolbox where you make games of your own, so I'm not sure how involved the writing would have been there. It's certainly nothing comparable to Bloodlines, and there's a TV show I've never heard of, and then yeah, that's pretty much it. So you've got someone who's very inexperienced, I would say, when you compare her to her peers, other people in the role-playing industry who've also failed to some degree when it comes to narrative design in modern games. You only have to look at Obsidian for that, where the Outer Worlds, a bit of a mixed reception, I would say, in the RPG space, and that had some really big players, like the creator of Fallout. He was one of the directors of the game, and that game was still considered middling to a lot of people. So I think they're really putting their eggs in a bit of a basket here by having Kara work on this game and be one of the lead writers, and not have Chris involved at all now. Apparently they've even removed his work from the game, so who knows if it was good or if it was rubbish and they wanted it out anyway and it was convenient. Hard to say, but Hardsuit Labs, just in general, they've never made a role-playing game. In fact, they've made one game prior to this. It was a multiplayer shooter, which is now pretty much off the market. Like, I did a bit of research into it and what it's like, but they've actually removed the PC servers, so I can't even play it. I think you've got to have a PS4, that's the only way to access it now, so certainly not a huge successful game. And now they're making this, Bloodlines 2. So no experience. Development looks like it's going to hell to some degree. They're way out from the original release date. We're getting into 21, and I don't think this game's even close to ready. I think they're still probably trying to figure out what they're going to do, because they made a bunch of promises. They went really in depth about the character creation and how there's pronouns and you can do all this stuff, but what about the damn game? What about the gameplay? What about the RPG aspects of it? I want to know what's going on there, and I want to see some of this. I don't want you to just talk about it, because if I pre-ordered, which I did not, there's no way I'm pre-ordering this potential garbage anytime soon, but if I had have pre-ordered it back in March of last year, then I'd be pretty damn frustrated. This is like Kickstarter levels of failure at this point. If I pre-ordered it back then, like, I want to get what I was promised. I want to find out what's going on, and I think they would be doing a good service to people by offering refunds and putting that out there as at least an option, because you've gone so far past the release date that it's starting to look a bit stupid. And I think we're going to get into next year, and I don't think all the gameplay and all this amazing stuff's just going to come out of nowhere. I think for that to happen, they probably need another couple of years to actually work on this, given how little we've seen of it. I think what Hardsuit Labs and the team are probably finding out is making a role-playing game is pretty damn hard. It's not easy, and there's a reason that very few developers are tackling this sort of RPG, where you've got the factions and you've got all of these different elements. When you've got designers who just don't have that experience, it's going to be very tough to make things happen. In a 3D setting, with 3D tools and all the different complications that need to happen, we just haven't really seen it in a game of that kind of scale that wants to have AAA values. It wants to have the big open world. It wants to have all these things happening. I think it's very tricky. The games in the past that did it were games like the original Fallouts, which are isometric. It was probably a little bit easier to design in that way, and instead of having a huge open world, they really just had hubs. If we look at New Vegas, yep, that was a lot different. They had the big world, but it seems like at the moment that's the exception, not the rule. Obsidian certainly haven't made a game of that scale since that's had the same level of success, the same level of kind of interactivity with the entire world and all of the factions. It just hasn't really been done, and that was released, 10 years ago? And no one's chasing that train, really, it looks like. It looks like people are kind of scared to go down that road because it's so hard. And now Paradox and Hardsuit Labs have tried to do it, and it looks like they're failing and they're not really getting close. I really laughed when they released the video of Damsel, and I thought, this is sort of what you said that you weren't doing so long ago, when now it's like you've come knocking back on fans' door and saying, hey, no, look, we're still here. Please pre-order, because those numbers are going down now. They're not jumping up and up like they were back in 2019. We need that cash coming in, or Paradox is going to just make us shit this thing out, and that'll be the end of us. That's the vibe I'm getting from them now. So yeah, this game, I think it's a mess. If I'm wrong and the delays are simply due to what's going on in the world, then I'm sorry. If that's the case, it releases next year and it's incredible, then I will be glad to be wrong, because it's hard to get a game with the factions and that different level of RPG we don't get very often now. I don't want Witcher 3 style RPGs to be the only ones going out there. I want there to be that mix, so everyone gets something for them. Everyone likes different things. So yeah, a game in this universe that's incredible, people will be very, very happy. And I don't want this to fail. It's just, from what we're seeing, I don't want to get my hopes up. I don't want to get anyone else's hopes up. and I think we need to really keep our expectations in check at this point. If I'm looking forward to RPGs, looking at what's kind of coming next, I'd be looking more towards Baldur's Gate 3. I'd be looking at what the creators of Disco Elysium come up with next. There's a few games like that in the pipeline. We've got Wasteland 3 at the end of the month. That might be worth checking out. It'll be interesting to see if that studio's learnt from some of their failings, like Torment and Wasteland 2, which was a decent game, but I wouldn't put it on a Fallout level. Certainly not. I think what people get really hyped at when it comes to a game like Vampire, and I'm talking on more a casual RPG fan's expectations, not so much someone who's already a huge fan of the series, huge fan of the tabletop game. I think just that average fan, they really like the sound of a role-playing game that isn't in that typical fantasy kind of setting, because it opens up a lot of new possibilities. It's one of the reasons I really like Deus Ex, because it's such a new take. Having that modern, futuristic world and having an RPG set in it, it just opens up new things that you can't always do in a fantasy game. And when I say fantasy game, I mean more the swords and sorcery kind of style. So, Vampire had the potential to do that. I think we're running into a situation now where it might release pretty half-baked and they'll just get it out there, onto those obligations, onto the pre-orders, and then we'll see. But if that's completely wrong, they turn around next year with an incredible Game of the Year, a big fuck you to me because I was completely wrong and they had an absolute goldmine just sitting there, then absolutely, that'll be fine, but we're not going to find out until 2021, it seems like. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please comment, like, and subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.